I'm Eli Tran, 29, youngest son of the Tran family conglomerate and founder of Glassline AI. The meeting room smelled like polished mahogany and lemony disinfectant. Crisp water pitchers lined the table. 11 chairs were filled. The 12th, the one I used to sit in, was gone. I stood at the double glass doors of Tran Holdings' executive boardroom, my palms lightly sweating, dressed in a navy blazer that suddenly felt too tight around the neck. Inside, the others were already seated, my father at the head of the table in his iron gray suit. My mother beside him, red lips drawn tight. My two older brothers, Mason and Victor, flanked either side. A few uncles, an aunt, the family lawyer, even the CFO, all present, all invited, except me. I cleared my throat and tugged gently on the stainless handle. The receptionist from the front desk, Annalise, appeared out of nowhere and blocked the doorway with a polite but firm step. "I'm sorry, Mr. Eli, but this meeting is for board members only." I blinked. "I'm on the board." Her eyes softened. She leaned in a little. "Not anymore. They filed the restructure this morning. Behind the thick glass." Victor noticed me. He smirked, tapped his pen twice on the table, and turned away. Mason didn't even look. I stared at Annalise, searching her face for some kind of secret signal that this was all a misunderstanding, a prank, a test, but she only stood straighter. "I'm going to ask you to wait in the outer lounge." "Sir." My voice caught in my throat, but I managed. "Did my father approve this?" Her eyes flicked toward the boardroom. It came from him. "I'm sorry." The hallway suddenly felt colder. I stepped back slowly as the glass doors swung shut in front of me, muffling the low murmur of voices deciding the future of something I'd given my entire 20s to. Voices that had always sounded like family but now just sounded like locks clicking shut. If you've ever had your own blood treat you like a stranger in your own story, drop a comment or let me know where you're watching from. Hit like or subscribe if family drama ever made you feel invisible too. I didn't move. I just stood there in the corridor while the people who raised me pretended I didn't exist. Then, I heard another set of footsteps, heavier, deliberate. "Eli," a voice called. I turned to see Emery Klein, CEO of Klein Tech Capital, walking toward me with a calm, measured stride. In his hand was a leather-bound folder with the seal of our company burned into its corner. In the folder was a purchase offer. My purchase offer. "What are you doing out here?" he asked, glancing at the sealed doors. "You're the one they're about to talk about." I looked at him. They didn't let me in. His brow furrowed, and without another word, he opened the door himself. The room fell silent. All 11 heads turned. My father's eyes froze on mine. Victor's pen stopped mid-spin. Emery stepped aside. I walked in. The silence in the room didn't feel like respect. It felt like static, sharp, uncomfortable, and about to snap. I kept walking, slow but steady, toward the seat that used to have my nameplate. No one spoke. Not even my mother, who usually filled silences with the tap of her manicured nails or a cool, disapproving sigh. This time, even she was still. I didn't sit. I placed my hands on the back of the empty chair and looked straight at my father. "I wasn't invited," I said quietly. He didn't flinch. "You're no longer a board member. Eli, this meeting concerns equity adjustments. It doesn't require your presence." I nodded once, absorbing the blow like I'd trained myself to over the years. "So you removed me without a conversation." Victor leaned back, arms crossed. "You ghosted us for 2 years. You left the company." "Don't act surprised. I didn't ghost you," I said. "I built something. You just didn't think it was worth noticing." Mason finally spoke. "Startups fail every day. You chose your playground. This is real business. Eli. Real business. That stung more than I wanted to admit. But before I could respond, Emery stepped beside me and laid the folder on the table like it was an altar. He slid it forward, letting the Tran Holdings seal gleam beneath the overhead lights. My name is Emery Klein, managing partner at Klein Tech Capital. This, he tapped the folder, is an acquisition proposal. Glassline AI is prepared to purchase a 51% controlling share in Tran Holdings' logistics division. The air cracked. I watched the faces around the table struggle to register the meaning. Only my father remained perfectly still. You're joking, Victor said, half laughing, but it caught in his throat. I'm not, Emery replied calmly. The deal has been under negotiation for 4 months, fully funded, conditionally approved by the board of directors on our side. My father narrowed his eyes. Why logistics? Because it's the only part of your empire not hemorrhaging cash, Emery said bluntly, and because Eli owns the patent you need to automate your supply chain. You'd be obsolete without it in 5 years. You know that. That's why we're here. My heart was thudding in my chest, but I kept my face blank. Inside, I was remembering every time they called me the creative one with just enough sarcasm to slice, every time they asked if I was still playing with code, every silent family dinner where the boys talked business and I ate quietly. Outside the circle, I had always known I wasn't the golden son. Mason was the strategist, Victor, the executor. I was the weird one, the tech one, the one who designed things they didn't understand and dismissed as experimental. But they forgot something about experiments. Sometimes they work. My father finally spoke again. Why wouldn't you come to me first? I did. I said, twice. You missed the meetings. I left the pitch on your desk. You never read it. Mason rolled his eyes. Even if this is real, it's a conflict of interest. Your family. Emery raised an eyebrow. Actually, that's precisely why we ensured all transactions were handled at arm's length through proxy investors. It's clean, legal, and public. The word public did something to my father's face. His jaw ticked. He looked at my mother, who hadn't said a word. She just stared at the folder like it might bite her. Victor reached for the papers. Let me see the terms. Be my guest, Emery said. You'll find them generous. As Victor flipped through the pages, I looked around the room, forcing myself to see them not as family but as business people. People who had cut me out. People who thought I was nothing more than a stubborn little brother who couldn't handle legacy. Now they were being asked to see me as a buyer. Victor's voice sliced through the air again. This clause gives Glassline control of hiring and tech integration. Correct. Emery nodded. That's the point. My father stood up slowly. This is outrageous. It's math, I said, finally taking my seat. And leverage. Another silence fell. This one deeper. Heavier. Everyone could feel the shift. I wasn't just the black sheep anymore. I was the one holding the pen. You'd think I felt triumphant in that moment, like justice had been served and the hurt avenged. But all I felt was numb. Because it wasn't about the deal. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about the chair. The one they took away. I looked at my mother. Why didn't you call me back just once? Her eyes flickered. Then she looked down. Because we didn't understand you. Eli. You scared your father. That stunned me more than anything. Victor muttered. Jesus. Mom. But I held up a hand. No. Let her finish. She sighed, folding her hands in her lap. You weren't predictable. The rest of them followed the script. You didn't. That's not a reason to cut someone out. I said. It is. She whispered. In this family. Emery gently cleared his throat. If we could refocus, no. I said. It's fine. This is why I built what I built. I wasn't trying to take over. I was just trying to be seen. And now, they were all looking at me. Finally, I slid my own copy of the acquisition papers to my father. You can sign, or you can let logistics bleed dry. Either way, we move forward. I'm not here for permission. He stared at me, then at the folder. His hands didn't move. Then slowly he sat down, and the rest of the board followed. No one said a word. The sound of chairs adjusting, of pens clicking, of papers being passed, and me, sitting quietly in the seat they once took away from me. The meeting continued, but now, it was my meeting. The meeting lasted another 45 minutes, though I barely remember any of the actual discussion. People spoke in clipped voices about numbers and projections. They avoided eye contact with me, especially Mason, who had once coached me through my first high school investment pitch and now wouldn't even acknowledge my presence. I wasn't expecting warmth, but the silence still stung. There was something oddly mechanical about it all, like we were actors in a family drama where no one remembered the lines. After the signatures were inked and the copies neatly stacked, people started leaving the room one by one. Victor lingered by the coffee bar, pouring himself another espresso like it was any other Wednesday. My father stayed seated, watching me with the same unreadable expression he'd always worn when I was a child, trying to explain a science fair project he didn't understand. I stood slowly. Emery gave me a quiet nod and left, leaving me alone with the patriarch who raised me but never really saw me. I didn't do this to humiliate you, I said, not sure why I felt the need to defend myself. My father's fingers tapped the armrest of his leather chair. But you did. No, I gave you a solution. You just didn't like who it came from. He looked at me, eyes sharper now. You think this makes you the better man? No, I said, my voice steady. It makes me someone who didn't wait to be chosen. He didn't respond. I walked out before I let the silence devour me again. Downstairs. The sunlight felt too bright against the glass lobby. It spilled across the marble floor, turning every footstep into a faint echo. I took off my blazer and slung it over my shoulder, breathing in the scent of pine cleaner and fresh paper. I'd spent years walking these halls as a kid, skating down them in sneakers, dodging interns and assistants. People used to say I had my mother's quiet, but my father's stubbornness. I used to believe that was a compliment. Now I wasn't sure. Outside, the city felt alive in a way the boardroom never could. Cars blared in the distance. A street performer was playing a jagged saxophone melody on the corner, the notes rising and falling with the traffic. I crossed the street without thinking, heading into the chaos. I found a bench a few blocks away, the kind nobody ever cleaned, with peeling green paint and initials carved into the wood. I sat down and finally let myself feel what I hadn't let show. Not pride, not relief. Something more fragile, like grief. Because no matter how well I played the game, I had still lost something. That night. I didn't go home. I went to the office. My office. Glassline AI was just 6 floors above a vegan noodle bar in a half-gentrified block of warehouses. The elevator never worked quite right, so I took the stairs, the metal steps ringing under my feet as I climbed. The office lights were off when I arrived, but I didn't turn them on. The soft blue glow of our prototype wall was enough to light the room. Streams of code drifted across the digital display like rainfall. My team had built a neural logistics system that could forecast disruptions 2 weeks before they happened. Weather, fuel prices, dock delays. We'd cracked it. I sat on the edge of my desk, watching the screen in silence. The pain of being cut out, being disregarded, had always lived under the surface. I'd buried it beneath every late night, every whiteboard sketch, every failed iteration. I wasn't building Glassline for glory. I was building it to prove I existed. There's something that happens when you grow up in a family where your value is measured by how closely you follow the script. You either become what they expect, or you vanish. I refused to vanish. 2 weeks after the acquisition, I returned to the family estate for dinner. It wasn't my idea. My mother called me herself. "We need to keep appearances," she said, like I was just another variable in the family brand. "And your father? He's softened." I doubted that. But I went anyway. The estate looked the same: sweeping gates, perfectly manicured hedges, the koi pond still glimmering like glass beneath the moonlight. I parked my car on the gravel driveway and walked up the steps, suddenly aware of how different I looked now. Not richer, just older, firmer. Not the son who left, the man who returned. My brothers were already inside. Mason offered a polite nod. Victor avoided me completely. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, under a chandelier my mother claimed was imported from Austria. The plates were bone white, the napkins starched stiff. The food was exquisite and utterly tasteless. Conversation was forced, mostly politics and market chatter. My father said little. My mother tried too hard. "So," she said brightly, halfway through dessert, "how is your little company adjusting to managing a legacy division Glassline's adapting?" I said, "We onboarded the logistics team this week." Mason smirked. "They'll chew your engineers alive." I smiled back. That's what they said about me too. Victor finally spoke. "You're not keeping Tran Holdings on the letterhead, are you?" I shook my head. "We're rebranding." Silence. My mother's fork paused in midair. My father leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "To what I sip my water. GLT. It reflects the merger, and it's easier to pronounce globally." My father set down his glass a little too hard. "You're erasing your name." "No," I said softly. "I'm building mine." He stared at me. Then, for the first time in years, I saw something flicker in his face. Maybe disappointment, maybe acceptance, or maybe it was just a mirror finally turned toward him. Later that night, as I was leaving, my mother walked me to the door. She placed a hand on my arm, light but deliberate. "You didn't have to do it this way," she said. I looked at her. "No, but you left me no other way." She nodded slowly, as if she'd known that all along. "He won't say it, but your father is proud. He's just not built for apologies." "I didn't need one," I replied. "I needed a seat." She pulled me into a sudden, brief hug, the kind you give someone you once loved more simply. "You have one now. Just be careful what you do with it." As I walked back to my car, I looked up at the house, this museum of tradition, of legacy, of unspoken rules. I felt no warmth, no triumph, just space. Space between who I was and who I'd become. It was early morning, maybe 6:15 when I walked into the Glassline office the next day. The air was still heavy with the scent of solder and faint coffee. Someone had left the espresso machine on overnight again. A fine mist from the steam clung to the window near the kitchenette, catching the orange sunrise and making the office glow like an underwater cave. This place didn't have a boardroom with a 10-foot chandelier or mahogany chairs with engraved initials, but it had whiteboards still covered in dry erase equations from 3 nights ago. It had corkboards pinned with designs and post-its scribbled with jokes only our dev team understood. And it had walls that didn't care who your father was. Jules, my lead engineer, was already there, feet up on her desk, headphones around her neck, chewing on a granola bar like it was a piece of evidence she didn't trust. "You sleep?" she asked without looking up from her screen. "Barely." I said, "Family dinner." She winced. "Oof. Anyone cry or flip a chair?" Not this time, I muttered. They just sat there and watched me erase our last name from their company. Jules turned and gave me a long look. You okay? That was the thing. I didn't know. There was no manual for this moment. For walking out of a mansion and into a rented loft where everything smelled like ramen and electricity and hope. No script for being the outcast who ended up the one holding the keys to everything. I think I'm still catching up to myself, I said. Jules nodded and tossed me a cold can of yerba mate from the fridge. Then let's write the next chapter. Investor call at 10. Demo at noon. And there's a college intern on the 5th floor who swears he fixed the bottleneck in the route prediction loop. I smiled. Show me. The next few weeks passed in a blur of server errors, late-night revisions, and constant meetings with legal to smooth out the final stages of the acquisition. Every few days, a former Tran Holding staffer showed up at our door, some nervous, some proud, all wary of me. Some couldn't even look me in the eye. I didn't blame them. I remembered what I used to look like in that world, quiet, wide-eyed, always trying to prove myself. Now I was the one with authority, and I still felt like I was faking it half the time. Then one morning, in a moment that felt impossibly small, but somehow seismic, I found myself in the same elevator as Mason. We were both attending a logistics summit at the International Convention Center. The event had assigned us to adjacent speaking slots. I hadn't seen him since that dinner at the estate. He entered the elevator at the 5th floor. I was already inside. He saw me, paused a beat, and stepped in anyway. We stood side by side. He stared at the floor numbers. I stared at our reflections in the chrome doors. Two brothers, dressed in suits that cost more than our first cars, but carrying entirely different weights. Finally, as the elevator climbed past the 10th floor, he spoke. You surprised, Dad. Didn't mean to, I said. I just stopped asking for permission. He gave a quiet huff that might have been a laugh. You know, he used to say you had too much heart for business. I still do, I said. I just built walls around it. He looked at me now. Not down, not away, at me. You really think this thing of yours can run supply chains for Fortune 100s? I nodded. We're already doing it. He tapped his fingers against the wall. I don't like how they treated you. But you need to know none of us thought you'd pull it off. Not even me. Thanks for your honesty, I said dryly. The elevator dinged. He stepped out first, then paused and turned. But you did. And whether or not you think I care, respect is earned. Eli, you've got mine now. He didn't wait for a reply. He just walked away. Later that day, I stood on a small stage with a mic clipped to my lapel, staring out at an audience of logistics professionals, tech investors, and former board members who now answered to me. I should have been nervous, but I felt something else: clarity. This isn't a story about artificial intelligence, I began. It's a story about exclusion, about what happens when you shut someone out and what they build when no one's watching. The room was silent. This company was born not out of vengeance, but out of necessity. I didn't build Glassline AI to replace anyone. I built it because no one believed in what I could contribute, not even my family. I paused, letting the weight settle, but now that it's here, it's going to change everything. When the applause came, it didn't feel like validation. It felt like a beginning. A few nights later, I found myself back at the family estate, not for dinner this time, but to retrieve something I had left behind years ago. My mother answered the door, wearing a silk robe and looking like she hadn't aged a day since my high school graduation. She didn't smile, but she let me in. I figured you'd come for it eventually, she said. She led me to the study. The room was untouched, still lined with old tax books, oil paintings, and the scent of cigars and dust. On the desk was the item I came for, my grandfather's compass. It had been a gift. The last one I ever received before the family stopped seeing me as an heir and started treating me like a footnote. "You really want this old thing?" my mother asked softly. I picked it up, ran my thumb across the scratched brass surface. The needle still trembled before it pointed north. It always reminded me there was a direction, even if it wasn't the one you all chose. She folded her arms. "You're not going to lose yourself in all this, are you?" "No," I said, slipping the compass into my pocket. "I already found myself." I drove back that night along the coast highway, windows down, wind washing over my face like water. The city lights blinked in the distance, tiny futures waiting to be claimed. My phone buzzed in the passenger seat. A message from Emery. "Your name's on the Forbes list. Front page." I didn't click the link. Instead, I kept driving, because sometimes peace isn't found in recognition, it's found in movement. I didn't tell anyone at the office about the Forbes list. I knew they'd find out soon enough, someone always did. It was the kind of news that gets passed around Slack threads like wildfire. "Look who made it. CEO's on the cover." We're officially not a joke anymore. But for me, that wasn't the moment that meant anything. What meant something was coming into the office the next morning and seeing the intern, Theo, still sitting at his desk at 7:45 a.m., surrounded by a fortress of energy drink cans and protein bar wrappers, writing some of the most elegant back-end code I'd seen all quarter. What meant something was seeing Jules arguing with supply chain analysts over a new rollout model with a grin on her face, like she was in a boxing match she'd already won. What meant something was walking past our wall of wins, a corkboard in the hallway we'd started as a joke, and noticing that someone had pinned the first shipment log from the new Tran GTL integration. A single sheet of paper that read, "Successful route. 98.4% predictive accuracy. No delays." There was a tiny sticky note next to it. "We did it. Boss." Zia. That was the moment. Not the article. Not the magazine. Just the quiet evidence of movement. Still, the article changed things. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Old friends, journalists, investors who had passed on our seed round 2 years ago suddenly wanted to schedule meetings to reconnect. My LinkedIn inbox became a digital war zone of corporate flattery and strategic flings. And eventually, of course, there was a text from Victor. "V. You free for lunch this week? Just you and me. No suits." It was unexpected, not unwelcome. We met at a street taco place near the university. We both dropped out of him to join the family business. Me to study machine learning and, eventually, burn out under a cloud of self-doubt and espresso. Victor arrived first. He'd changed. Or maybe I just hadn't looked closely in years. His hair was more silver than black now. He wore a hoodie over his button-up shirt, like someone pretending not to care while still kind of caring. "You didn't respond to my text," he said as I sat down. "I'm here," I replied, unwrapping my taco. He nodded. "Fair." We ate in silence for a bit. The air smelled like lime and cilantro. Someone was playing guitar a few feet away. I kept waiting for the real conversation to begin. And finally, it did. "You really built something," Victor said. I chewed, swallowed, and said, "Yeah, I did." He hesitated, then added, "I didn't think you had it in you." I looked up. No one did. "I think we were scared," he admitted. "Dad especially. You weren't like us. You didn't need the rooms we built to matter. That made you dangerous." I blinked. "You thought I was dangerous?" "Not in a bad way," he said. "Just in a way we didn't understand. You were a variable we couldn't calculate. And in business, unpredictability feels like a threat." I took another bite, thought about that. But I wasn't trying to be unpredictable. I said, I was just trying to find my place. Victor leaned back, arms crossed. And now you've got it. More than a place, you've got power. Power's not what I wanted, I said, not because it sounded noble, but because it was true. I wanted the freedom to make something real. He nodded. You did. And I guess I'm trying to say I respect that. Even if it came at our expense. We sat with that for a moment. Then he asked, more softly, do you think we can work together again? Someday. I didn't answer right away. The question felt too heavy to handle quickly. It wasn't just about logistics or contracts. It was about trust. About whether blood meant partnership or just proximity. I don't know, I said honestly. Let's see who we are when we're not pretending. Victor smiled. For real this time. Fair enough. The next few months became something I hadn't expected. Steady. Not euphoric, not tragic, just steady. We closed new contracts. Glassline's hybrid model spread across 3 continents. We landed our first government contract. Our predictive algorithms hit 99.1% reliability in winter months, something no one thought was possible. I even took a weekend off and didn't check my phone once. But there were still moments. Moments where I'd open my inbox and see a forwarded memo from my father. No message. Just the data. Silent approval. Maybe. Moments when Mason sent over research files for potential expansions, not with a smile, but with bullet points and timestamps. His version of extending an olive branch. And moments when my mother would call just to ask how I was sleeping. Those were the ones that undid me, because under all the progress and growth and numbers, I was still the kid who once waited in the hallway outside the boardroom, listening to my own future being decided without me. I never forgot that, and I never wanted anyone on my team to feel that either. So I started a rule. Every quarter, we'd have a full team meeting no matter how big we got, where everyone, from janitor to CFO, could submit one idea, anonymously or not, and we'd discuss them all. No one would wait in the hallway again. Then came the letter. It was on thick paper, the kind you only use when you want someone to feel the weight before they even read it. My assistant left it on my desk without comment. I opened it slowly. Inside was a simple note, written in my father's handwriting. If you're going to lead, do it better than I ever did. Dad. No other words. No apology. No signature. But somehow, it was enough. Not because it fixed everything, but because it finally admitted what I had known all along. I wasn't a shadow of what they built. I was the proof that something new could be built from being left out. That night, I stood alone on the rooftop of our building. The skyline shimmered in the dark, planes blinking in slow arcs overhead. I pulled the old compass from my pocket, let it spin in my palm, north, south, east, west. It didn't matter, because now, for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting to be told where to go. I was already there, and still moving. The next shift came quietly. No headlines, no shareholder drama, no applause. Just a call from our new logistics chief, one of the old Tran Holdings veterans who had decided to stay after the acquisition. He asked, cautiously, would you consider flying out to the Osaka hub? Why, I asked. We just hit a disruption threshold we couldn't forecast. Earthquake damage. Multiple routes blocked. 2 days of stalled deliveries. Your system caught it 26 hours before we did, but the local managers ignored the alert. I paused. Send me the internal chain. I'll be there tomorrow. The airport terminal was nearly empty when I landed. A light drizzle kissed the windows as I stepped into the humid Osaka evening. The air smelled like wet concrete and something fried and comforting from a nearby vendor stall. No red carpets, no chauffeurs, just me with a carry-on and a folder full of breach reports. I took a cab straight to the logistics facility. It was nearing midnight, but the hub never slept. Towering cranes moved like slow beasts above the yard, lit in rotating strobes of yellow and white. Forklifts zipped along marked lanes, containers stacked like city blocks, organized chaos. Inside, the mood was tight. Tension lived in every nod. The manager, Mr. Hoshino, greeted me with a tired bow. He was a man who'd worked in shipping before I was born, and it showed in his calm, in his cynicism, in his absolute certainty that algorithms were toys and people were the real system. He offered me tea. I declined politely. I read the transcripts. I said, "Your team ignored the predictive warnings for a Category 3 earthquake impact." He sat quietly, fingers pressed together, then said, "We've been through earthquakes before. Models aren't perfect, neither is panic. And now you're behind on $1.2 million in priority freight." I replied. He didn't argue. He just stared at me. "You came all the way here to say what? That your machine is smarter than us?" "No," I said, setting the report down. "I came to listen, and to show you we're on the same side." That was the real shift. Not just owning a company, but learning how not to wield it like a sword. We stayed up until 3 a.m. troubleshooting the routing backups together. His team, my engineers, who dialed in from 3 time zones. We rebuilt the prediction thresholds to account for cultural hesitations in emergency responses. By dawn, we had a fix. Mr. Hoshino walked me out to the loading bay as the sun rose. "Your father would never have done that," he said quietly. "I'm not my father," I said. He nodded once. "Good. Back in the US." I returned to an office that felt subtly different, not bigger, just more real. Someone had painted a mural on the back wall overnight, a stylized compass made entirely out of gears and circuits. At the center, the phrase, "Let the outsiders build the map." No one claimed it. No one needed to. I started noticing things more after that. The way new hires spoke up faster during meetings. How our interns stayed later but laughed more. How Jules started hosting Friday night strategy sessions that looked suspiciously like karaoke parties. We weren't just scaling. We were becoming a culture. One born from rejection. And fueled by it. A few weeks later, I got a voicemail from my mother. Her voice was uncharacteristically gentle. "Your father's not well. I think you should come." No details, no tone, just a doorway left open. I drove out to the estate that same night, unsure of what I was even feeling. Guilt obligation. I hadn't seen my father in person since the logistics deal closed. The house looked the same cold stone, golden windows, vines carefully shaped by hired hands. Inside, the silence was thick. My mother met me at the door, her face thinner than before, her makeup perfectly applied. "He's in the study," she whispered. "He's been asking about you." I stepped through the doorway slowly. My father sat in his leather chair, a blanket over his knees, an oxygen tube faintly hissing beside him. The light from the desk lamp cast deep shadows under his eyes. He looked up as I entered. "Eli," he rasped. "You came." "Of course I did." He gestured weakly to the chair across from him. I sat. There was a long pause. Then he said, "I read your Osaka report." "You always did read everything," I murmured. He smiled faintly. "Not everything. I ignored a lot, especially when it came to you." That surprised me. He turned his head slightly, staring out the window where the dark trees swayed in the wind. I used to think strength meant tradition, uniformity, control. But watching you, I realize now, sometimes strength is knowing when to step back. I swallowed hard. "That's not something you say lightly." He gave a shallow laugh. "No, it's not. And it's late." But I wanted you to hear it from me. Hear what that you built something I never could have imagined. And I'm proud of you. Not because you won, but because you didn't quit when we made you feel worthless." He looked back at me then, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "I'm sorry, Eli, for everything. It wasn't grand, it wasn't cinematic, but it was real, and it landed in a place I hadn't even realized was still aching." I didn't cry, but I nodded, and he nodded too. He passed away 6 weeks later. The funeral was quiet, private. His legacy stretched across real estate, shipping, and a half-century of calculated power, but in the end, it was just a man's life, folded into silence. I stood beside the casket in a black suit that still didn't quite feel like me. Victor gave the eulogy. Mason handled the guests. My mother stood still as stone. I didn't speak, but I watched, and I listened. And when it was over, I walked out into the open air, heart heavier than expected, but clear. Weeks turned into months. Glassline merged fully with its acquisition targets. We launched a new predictive infrastructure system that outperformed every benchmark we set. Our tech was being used in 5 continents. We weren't the underdogs anymore. We were the future people used to scoff at and now relied on. And somehow, the silence I'd once feared no longer followed me. I had been cut out of the room once, but now I understood some of us are born into legacy, and some of us carve it out of the silence they leave behind. They asked me to return to the Tran estate one final time, not for a family gathering, not for business, for the reading of the will. It was a foggy morning, the kind where everything looks a little washed out, like the world itself is still waking up. I parked outside the gate and sat in the car for a minute, fingers resting lightly on the wheel. The stone lion statues looked smaller than I remembered, less intimidating. Funny how memory inflates things. When I stepped inside, the atmosphere was brittle. My mother wore black again, though this time without pearls. Mason stood stiffly in the corner, arms folded. Victor leaned against the fireplace, expression unreadable. There were no aunts, no cousins, just us. And Mr. Lowell, the family attorney who'd been with our company since before I was born. He adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and began reading. It was all very formal. Accounts, trusts, properties, legal language that felt like punctuation after a long sentence none of us had written. Then he reached the addendum. Before his passing, Lowell said, "Your father made a few personal requests." We all sat up. To Mason Tran. He read, "I leave the house in Marbella. Your precision, though cold at times, always brought structure. Use the space to find a rhythm outside of business." Mason gave a single nod, betraying no emotion. To Victor Tran. Lowell continued, "I leave the lake property and all remaining recreational assets. Your fire was both a gift and a burden. Let water cool what legacy ignited." Victor shifted. That was all. Lowell turned to me, and to Eli Tran. Everyone froze. I leave my compass, and controlling shares in the Tran family trust. The room cracked. Victor's voice shot out first. He gave him control. "That has to be a mistake. It's notarized," Lowell said calmly. "Your father amended the will a month before his passing." Mason stood up. "That trust owns the holding company. That's everything." "No," I said quietly. "It's what's left." All eyes turned to me, and for the first time, I didn't flinch. Lowell slid a small velvet box across the desk toward me. I opened it. Inside was my grandfather's brass compass, the same one I'd taken months ago. But this wasn't a duplicate. It was another one. On the back, scratched in faded, hurried script, was a message. "For when you stop running, Dad, I stared at it for a long time. Not because it made everything better, but because it finally made something make sense. He'd known. He'd seen what I built, not just what I took. And somehow, in his own fractured way, he tried to show that he understood. We didn't talk much after the will. Mason left without a word. Victor followed, jaw tight. My mother lingered, sipping cold tea from a porcelain cup. I walked her to the doorway. "You okay?" I asked. She looked at me. Really looked. For the first time in what felt like years. "You never needed any of this. Did you?" "No," I said, "but I came anyway." She touched my cheek briefly with cool fingers. "You're stronger than all of us. Just don't become one of us." And with that, she closed the door behind me. Back at the office, nothing had changed. Not visibly, but something in me felt quieter, settled. I didn't announce the will to the company, didn't post about it, didn't suddenly install family heirlooms or rename departments. Glassline stayed Glassline. But I made one change. A small plaque, mounted on the lobby wall beside the front entrance. It read, "Founded from silence, built on belonging." Below that, a simple brass compass embedded in the wall, needle locked in place forever pointing forward. We started getting requests to speak at universities, not the usual tech conferences or AI showcases, but ethics forums, business leadership classes, entrepreneurship panels. At first, I declined. Public speaking had never been my comfort zone. But then I thought of the students' kids like me sitting in the back rows, doodling startup ideas while their professors talked about legacy and power and family business. Like those things came wrapped in perfect bows. I agreed to one, then another, then 5. At one panel, during a Q&A, a student asked, "Do you think getting cut out of the family meeting made you stronger?" I paused. "No," I said. "I think it made me lonelier. But sometimes, loneliness shows you where you really stand." Another student raised a hand. "What did you learn from building something without their support?" I thought again. That building something doesn't always heal the wound, but it gives you a place to stand while you carry it. The room was silent. Then they clapped. After one of the talks, a young woman approached me outside. She had a notebook full of sketches, graphs, and equations. Nervous hands, sharp eyes. "I started something," she said, "but no one takes me seriously, not even my family." I smiled gently. "Good. That means you're probably onto something." She laughed, but it came out a little shaky. "What if I fail? Then you'll learn faster than the ones who didn't try," I said. She nodded, then added, "You ever wish they believed in you sooner? All the time?" I admitted. "But," I said, "then I might not have believed in myself this hard." That night, I sat alone in the glass-lined break room, watching the city through the window. The vending machine hummed behind me. Somewhere, someone laughed in a late Zoom meeting. There was life in the walls. I pulled out the second compass, my father's, set it on the table beside my tea. It spun slowly, as if reluctant to settle, just like me. But it pointed north eventually. They always do, even after being dropped, discarded, forgotten. They still find direction. So do we. Weeks later, I got a call from Mason. He didn't start with small talk. "Victor wants out," he said. "He's selling his stake. And I want you to take it. I don't want it going to an outside bidder." "That depends," I said. "Are you asking me as a brother or a businessman?" He paused, then said, "Maybe both." I smiled. "Okay," I said. "Let's talk terms." We met at a small diner, the same one Dad used to take us to when we were kids. Back when things were simpler. Back when legacy just meant getting a vanilla milkshake without having to split it. We signed the paperwork in a corner booth. No ceremony, no photographers, Just two brothers reclaiming what years of silence had fractured. When it was done, Mason looked at me and said, "So what now? You gonna rename everything Eli Inc.?" I laughed. "No, I'm not that sentimental." He smirked. "Good. Dad would have hated that." We clinked coffee cups like they were champagne flutes, and in that strange little diner, surrounded by laminated menus and the hum of a broken jukebox, we finally felt like something close to family. Not perfect, not whole, but real. A year passed. Not like a page turned, but like a tide came in slowly and carried away everything I thought I had to hold. The board meetings became more strategic, less personal. Our leadership team doubled. We opened a Berlin satellite office. Investors I once begged for seed money were now pitching me. My days were booked in 15-minute blocks. And yet, I felt lighter than I had in years. I still kept both compasses, my grandfather's and my father's, on my desk, side by side, one smooth and polished, one dented and worn. Two different lives, two different men, two different stories pointing in the same quiet direction. Sometimes, I'd run my finger over the etched messages. One said nothing. The other said, "For when you stop running." And I had. Not because I stopped moving forward, but because I'd stopped trying to catch up to people who never waited for me in the first place. One Thursday afternoon, while reviewing operations updates, Jules knocked once and stuck her head into my office. "You got someone here." I looked up. "Who?" She tilted her head slightly, intrigued but not worried. "Says his name is Thomas Eldridge, works at Halverson Group, senior partner." I stood up. "Send him in." The Halverson Group was a multi-billion-dollar holding firm, the kind of people who only spoke to you when they were considering a merger, an acquisition, or a buyout. Thomas entered, dressed like a man who lived inside financial briefings in dark suits. He offered a firm handshake and took the seat across from me without waiting for small talk. "I'll get straight to it," he said. "We want to buy you out." I didn't blink. Glass line everything. I sat back. "Why now?" He smiled. "Because you've built something our analysts say will replace half of what we own in 5 years if we don't. We prefer to invest in what's coming rather than compete with it." He slid a folder across the desk. I didn't open it. "What happens to the team?" I asked. "Retention packages? Autonomy options? We want to absorb the ecosystem, not break it." "And me? You could stay on. Title of your choosing, or walk away with more money than your family made in 2 generations." I looked out the window. The city looked different from this floor. Not smaller, just calmer. Like it had finally stopped shouting. I didn't give him an answer. Not that day. I walked to the hallway, corkboard the wall of wins, and stared at everything we'd pinned there over the years. Photos from hackathons, flight logs, baby announcements, patent approvals, stickers, coffee-stained Post-its. A map of all our first shipments with red pins stuck into every continent except Antarctica. I touched one of the pins. Manila. Our very first reroute success. The one that made Jules cry and Theo scream. I remembered that day like it happened 5 minutes ago. I looked at the buyout folder in my hand. Then I turned around and walked back into my office. That weekend, I drove to the family estate. No reason. No event. I just wanted to see it again. No one was home. The caretakers let me in. The place hadn't changed. The marble floors still gleamed. The paintings still hung in their same, cold symmetry. My mother's piano still sat by the window, untouched. But it all felt smaller now, like a memory that didn't stretch as far as it once did. I walked into the old boardroom, the one they shut me out of years ago. It still had 12 chairs. Mine had been returned. I sat in it. The sun filtered through the curtains. casting a long, golden stripe across the table. I closed my eyes. And for a moment, I wasn't CEO of anything. I was just a boy in a room where he didn't belong, but I did now. I got up and walked out. The next day, I called Thomas Eldridge. "I'm not selling," I said. He paused. "You sure I built this so no one else could decide my value again?" "That hasn't changed." He laughed, not offended. "I expected that." "Then why the offer?" "To see if you'd forgotten who you were? Seems you haven't." We hung up, and just like that, the future stayed mine. Time passed. Jules got married. Theo got promoted. Zia left to start her own company, and we became her first investors. Glassline kept growing. We weren't a startup anymore. We were an ecosystem. We were the space people found when every door was shut in their face. One day, I found a box on my desk. No return label. Inside an old family photo, me, Mason, Victor, and Dad taken at a company picnic when I was 10. I was holding a paper plate full of watermelon slices and smiling like I didn't know anything was broken yet. Taped to the back was a note in Mason's handwriting. "Thought you'd want this." Dad kept it in his drawer. I didn't hang it up, but I kept it. Not for nostalgia, but because the boy in that picture needed to be remembered. He was the one who kept going. He was the one who built all this. Sometimes, late at night, I walk the halls of our headquarters. No meetings, no emails, just me and the quiet hum of servers. I pass the mural in the lobby. I pass the corkboard. I touch the compass embedded in the wall. And I think of everyone who's ever been cut out of something they were born into. Let me tell you this. They might take your seat. They might close the door. They might pretend you don't belong. But they cannot stop what you build when no one's watching. They cannot erase what you become when you're not seeking their approval. And they cannot buy what you've made when it's rooted in something they never understood. Belonging doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from choosing yourself. So build. Keep building. And when they come knocking again, remember who you are without them. Then open the door. Or don't. The choice is finally yours.